the United Nations enshrined in its charter, including sovereign equality, non-interference, peaceful resolution of disputes, and collective security. I also thank the UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, for his instructive briefing. Multilateralism has been the cornerstone of international peace and security for 8 decades. As we approach the 80th anniversary of the United Nations later this year, it is a moment for reflection, to celebrate its achievements, acknowledge its shortcomings, and reaffirm our shared commitment to building a more just, equitable, and effective multilateral system. The United Nations was founded in the aftermath of the devastating Second World War with a solemn pledge to, I quote, save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Over the past 8 decades, multilateralism has been pivotal in preventing and addressing conflicts, promoting peace, and advancing development. Yet, despite global wealth increasing, we face growing inequality both within and among nations. With 700 million people living in extreme poverty, constituting 8.5% of the global population, our world is beset by unprecedented challenges, including conflicts, pandemics, humanitarian crises, climate change, and technological disruptions. These require urgent, collective, and innovative responses. To address these pressing issues, let me highlight 4 key points. First, Sierra Leone strongly believes that multilateralism remains the best means to address global challenges. As the UN Secretary General rightly stated, there is no other way to deal with global challenges than with global responses organized in a multilateral way. However, for multilateralism to be truly effective, it must be inclusive, representative, and results-driven. Our multilateral system must adapt to the changes in global economic dynamics, population, and influence. In particular, women and youth, as major stakeholders, must actively participate in policy making and development processes. Moreover, developing countries, especially in Africa and the Global South, must have a stronger voice in global decision making. To this end, the UN Security Council, as the cornerstone of international peace and security, must be reformed to better reflect current geopolitical realities and ensure fair representation. Nearly 80 years since its formation, the Council remains outdated with its imbalanced composition, undermining its legitimacy and effectiveness. In this regard, Africa remains the most glaring victim of this inequity. Without structural reform, the Security Council's performance and legitimacy will continue to be questioned. As we reflect on the theme of reforming and improving global governance, it is crucial to recognize how Africa's exclusion from decision-making bodies such as the Security Council and the multilateral development banks hinders the continent's ability to contribute meaningfully to global governance. The legacy of colonialism, economic exploitation, and political marginalization has left deep scars, impairing Africa's development, stability, and influence in international affairs. In noting the African Union's theme of the year 2025, Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations, rectifying the historical injustice perpetuated against Africa, must be operationalized with the urgency of now. Mr. President, the Pact of the Future, adopted in September 2024, presents a critical opportunity to revitalize global cooperation and coordination based on trust, adaptability, and flexibility. The close cooperation between the Security Council and the African Union Peace and Security Council in addressing conflicts on the African continent demonstrates a commitment by both institutions to achieve the objectives of Action 21 of the Pact for achieving lasting peace and security. Recognizing the critical role of regional arrangements in preventing and resolving conflicts, this collaboration must be strengthened. Sierra Leone calls for concrete steps to implement the Pact's ambitious commitments, especially those related to the UN Security Council reform, bridging governance gaps, strengthening international cooperation, and reinforcing international law. Addressing inefficiencies and inconsistencies, particularly in improving the working methods of the Security Council, will enhance its legitimacy and capacity to implement the Pact for the Future and other forward-looking peace and development strategies. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that addressing global crises requires more than just force. It requires innovation, agility, trust, and the sharing of information and expertise. These same principles must guide our efforts to prevent wars and deliver life-saving aid. Mr. President, secondly, the erosion of the rules-based system threatens global stability. At a time when unilateralism, protectionism, and disregard for international norms are on the rise, security cannot be overstated. We must reaffirm our collective commitment to the principles of the UN Charter and upholding international law. A fair and consistent application of international law is essential to uphold the credibility of the global governance system and ensure peaceful coexistence. The Security Council must lead by example in upholding international law. The Council's resolutions must be implemented effectively and consistently, and international agreements and rules must be adhered to without selectivity, partiality, or double standards. To further strengthen multilateralism through international law, we encourage member states to utilize international judicial mechanisms as tools to address shared global concerns and disputes. In other words, judicial settlement of disputes, which gives significant expression to Article 2, Number 3 and 33 of the UN Charter. Third, the challenges of the 21st century extend beyond traditional security threats. Non-traditional security issues, including climate change, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, terrorism, and food insecurity, demand urgent and innovative global responses. These crises disproportionately affect developing nations, exacerbating their vulnerabilities. To address this, we must enhance capacity building, foster information sharing and technology transfer, and strengthen international cooperation to ensure no country is left behind. Fourth, the digital divide remains a critical challenge in our quest for equitable global governance. Many developing countries lack the infrastructure and resources to leverage technological advancement and digital transformation. Sierra Leone urges the international community to support initiatives that promote technological capacity building, digital inclusion, and fair access to global supply chains, ensuring that all nations can fully participate in the global economy. Mr. President, strengthening the role of the UN and Security Council requires unity, not division. We must set aside geopolitical rivalries and embrace dialogue, cooperation, and collective problem solving. Despite the varying socio-economic and political conditions of our countries, the scale and transnational nature of many global issues demand collective action. In these instances, multilateral frameworks are indispensable in preventing catastrophic consequences. The tools available to us have largely maintained a rules-based multilateral system. By improving these tools, we can better serve humanity. This includes strengthening resolution and peacekeeping mandates for clearer, more responsive and contextually relevant action, enhancing collaboration with regional entities to ensure faster and more agile responses to crises, promoting comprehensive peace and
طبعا خلاص بلاش ليك ودي عبس عليك
Gracias, señor presidente. Panamá agradece a la República Popular China por convocarnos hoy a este evento de alto nivel que nos invita a reflexionar sobre la fundación de las Naciones Unidas, sus propósitos y su futuro en la gobernanza global. Agradecemos además las importantes contribuciones realizadas por el secretario general Antonio Guterres. Damos una cordial bienvenida a Su Excelencia Wang Yi, Ministro de Relaciones Exteriores de la República Popular China, así como a los ministros de Estado que nos distinguen con su participación en este debate abierto. Señor presidente, el multilateralismo atraviesa su momento más crítico desde la fundación de las Naciones Unidas nacida hace 80 años de los
they take every day. Detectives stand united and will not back down on any commitment protecting our city, and this union will never back down fighting for our members. Thank you very much.
Contra las arbitrariedades de imposiciones de los más poderosos. Esa razón de ser de la gobernanza global se ha ido distorsionando.
All right, folks, we're going to take some on-topic questions. On-topic questions. Okay, we're going to start with Marla Diamond, 10 Wins.
So can you give us a timeline of the shooting? You spoke about an officer that was struck in the vest, and then we have the other officer. So when your officer was shot in the arm, was that as the police were going in or breaking down the door? Can you just talk about the timeline of events?
So the
shooting in the second.
The officers were initially making entry at 5:04 in the morning, where they're fired upon. They said they tactically move out of the hallway. They use a lot of restraint. They don't fire back because they don't know exactly what's going on in the apartment. They reposition themselves, and then they decide to make re-entry again. This time the officer is shot in the left shoulder. So there's two entries made. The initial entry, the officers are shot in the ballistic shield. They reposition. They make a second entry. The officer is shot in the left shoulder.
And that's when officers fired at the...
That is correct.
Okay, we're going to move on to WABC, Stefan Kim.
Was there a hostage inside? You said that you thought there was.
Initially, we thought that there was a female in the apartment. As it turned out, that was not the case.
We're going to go over to WNYC for Pearson.
Yes, hi. Wondering if you could tell us about the suspect's injuries at this time, where he was shot, and then did the member of service PDSU officer require any surgery?
As of right now, the officer has not required surgery. He's being treated. And as far as the perpetrator's injury, he's shot multiple times on his left flank, the left side of his body.
Okay, we'll go over to John Mueller. Okay.
His condition. What's the condition of the perpetrator?
The perpetrator right now is not in serious condition. He's not likely to die.
Okay, folks, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Passed away. Was that completely unrelated?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you offer any details on that?
We're going to find it out now.
Mr. Mayor, we see questions about what's going on with the governor and your future. You haven't answered questions for 2 weeks, sir.
Thank you. I can over to common sanitation, where I have
You haven't answered questions for 2 weeks for the governor since last night.
Your 4 deputy mayors likely seem to lose confidence in your ability to be mayor. You want to comment on that?
Has anything up the calls for the rest of the nation given you cause for resign?
Don't push me. Don't push me. Blocking us from walking.
You're preventing the mayor from being asked questions.
Yeah. Do you work for the mayor?
el servicio del comercio internacional y el libre tránsito marítimo del mundo. Fue en este Consejo, reunido en la ciudad de Panamá en 1973, cuando se internacionalizó la causa panameña, motivándose las partes a partir de ese momento trascendental a negociar tratados que pusieran fin a la presencia extranjera en nuestro territorio, garantizando el apoyo del mundo a nuestra soberanía plena e integridad territorial, un hito que 25 años después de la reversión del canal permite a los panameños el beneficio de un merecido crecimiento económico ejemplar en la región y en el mundo. Las realidades históricas de ese momento ya no reflejan las necesidades actuales, por lo que la reforma al Consejo de Seguridad es imprescindible. La obstrucción de consensos y el uso indiscriminado del veto por la falta de representatividad geográfica en este órgano deja sin respuesta la esperanza de millones de personas sumidas en la tragedia, en la hambruna y en crisis humanitarias sin soluciones integrales. Es momento de rescatar el multilateralismo de los escombros de la desconfianza y de revitalizar las decisiones que se toman tanto en este Consejo como en todos los espacios creados para abordar la gobernanza desde distintos ángulos, para reactivar la protección que el multilateralismo ofrece a los estados pequeños, unidos en su susceptibilidad contra la prepotencia de los intereses geopolíticos de otros. El multilateralismo no es una opción entre muchas, es el cimiento sobre el cual descansan la estabilidad y el bienestar internacional. Señor presidente, Panamá, al igual que muchos estados aquí presentes, puede sugerir soluciones. Sin embargo, estas soluciones no se traducirán en nada concreto si no confiamos en nosotros mismos y nos disponemos a poner en práctica los mecanismos que tenemos disponibles para hacer valer los mandatos de las decenas de resoluciones que aprobamos anualmente. El secretario general solo puede operar en los márgenes que esta membresía le permite, y es por eso que la manera de mantener la paz y la seguridad internacionales conectada al desarrollo sostenible y a los derechos humanos es haciendo valer la legítima voluntad política de nuestros pueblos. Nos enfrentamos a una crisis de representatividad en la que el poder político se ha concentrado en unos pocos, por lo que el resto se siente marginalizado. El mundo avanzó. Es nuestra responsabilidad no solo alcanzarlo, sino además anticiparnos a atender esa preocupación y lo que se avecina con el surgimiento de la inteligencia artificial, los retos a la ciberseguridad y la desinformación dirigida a polarizar, entre tantos otros retos que debemos enfrentar de manera colectiva. Señor presidente, es el momento de a reflexionar y a tomar acción para atender los fuertes cuestionamientos dirigidos hacia el sistema multilateral y la gobernanza global luego de 80 años de ejecución insuficiente para evitar que naufrague, sino, por el contrario, que se fortalezca y prospere. Muchas gracias.
我感谢巴拿马代表的发言，下面我请希腊代表发言。
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to start by thanking China and Foreign Minister Mr. Wei for selecting this very important topic and for convening this timely debate. And I also thank the Secretary General for his very interesting remarks. Mr. President, 2025 signifies a landmark year in the history of the United Nations. As we are preparing to celebrate its 80th anniversary, it's becoming more difficult to meet people that can remember a world without the United Nations, a world shaped by the horrors of the two world wars. Therefore, it is necessary to prevent, among future generations, the risk of oblivion of the devastation that preceded the creation of the organization through highlighting its accomplishments in the promotion of international peace and security, sustainable development, and the protection of human rights. It is also a good moment to take stock of multilateralism and global governance at present. Mr. President, no one can deny that our world is facing new, complex global challenges at a scale unthinkable in 1945, from wars and increasingly military expenditures to hunger, poverty, and unequal development. The permanent crisis in the Middle East, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the grave political and humanitarian crisis in Sudan, Sahel, Yemen, DRC, Haiti, and elsewhere are just a few examples of the serious threats of global stability in the UN Charter. We believe there is an urgent need for fundamental reform and improvement of our multilateral system with the UN at its core. A crucial step towards this direction was at the Summit of the Future, when the world leaders renewed the commitment to effective multilateralism by adopting the Pact of the Future and its annexes, the Global Digital Compact and the Declaration of Future Generation. Our Prime Minister has stated that the Pact of the Future, as a point of global consensus, is only a first step, but it's a necessary first step. It's a political declaration to act, and political will is a necessary driver for action at the national level and collectively at the global level. Greece calls for the rapid implementation of the relevant actions of the Pact, especially transforming global governments and reinvigorating the multilateral system to tackle these challenges and seize the opportunities of today and tomorrow. In this context, a reform of the central pillar of the international peace and security architecture, namely the Security Council, is also needed. We support any model of reform that is fair, strengthens the UN as a whole, and transforms the Security Council to a more democratic, efficient, representative, accountable body adjusted to the realities of the 21st century. We are convinced that these goals would be achieved through the enlargement of the Security Council, both with permanent and non-permanent members. We also call for strengthening the relationship of the Security Council with the General Assembly in order to maintain better international peace and security. Mr. President, during the intense negotiations of the Pact of the Future and beyond, Greece insisted that it was necessary to go back to the basics of the UN Charter, such as the peaceful settlement of dispute, the respect of international law, and the rules and principles of the Charter. These are core elements of Greece's participation to the Security Council and the necessary foundations of peace and prosperity across all nations. At the same time, we need to safeguard fundamental rights and freedoms, democracy and the rule of law in an increasingly authoritarian, dangerous and contested world where human dignity is progressively challenged and where war becomes more prevalent on a greater scale. Let me also stress that one of the Pact's significant achievements is the first global recommitment to nuclear disarmament since 2010. We stress the need this to serve as a basis for upholding and strengthening the international non-proliferation and disarmament architecture with NPT as its cornerstone. Mr. President, Greece recognizes the need to narrow the development divide and especially the digital divide. Peace and security cannot prevail in the absence of development and growth. Greece focuses its development efforts and allocates aid, including through capacity building, transfer of know-how and expertise, with the aim of contributing to the reduction of poverty and inequality in the world, the consolidation of peace and security, and in order to tackle the root causes of migration flows. We also believe that artificial intelligence offers tremendous opportunities for achieving the SDGs, and we are actively engaging to the discussion of the global governance of AI at the UN and other fora. Our common efforts to bridge the digital divide should focus on the implementation of the Global Digital Compact, which represents the first comprehensive global framework for digital cooperation, chartering a roadmap for global AI governance. Mr. President, we are also deeply concerned with the lack of substantial progress in tackling the effects of climate change. We reaffirm the importance of accelerated action in this critical decade on the basis of the best available science, and we welcome relevant decisions adopted at COP28 and 29. We also recognize the importance of support to developing countries and their access to climate finance, especially those that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. Mr. President, in closing, let me underline that the upcoming celebration of the 80th anniversary of the UN serves as a moment of collective reflection on the accomplishments of our organization, a reiteration of a common belief to its core values and principles, and a time to begin reforming global governance and the multilateral system. Let us all work together towards this direction. I thank you.
我感谢希腊代表的发言，下面我请俄罗斯代表发言。
Господин председатель, приветствуем личное участие министра иностранных дел Китайской Народной Республики в сегодняшних открытых дебатах. Приветствуем участие других министров и высокопоставленных представителей. Считаем предложенную китайским председательством тему крайне актуальной. Она дает хорошую возможность обсудить через геополитическую призму первопричины нынешнего глубокого кризиса современного международного миропорядка. Видим в сегодняшнем заседании своего рода продолжение дискуссии, состоявшейся в июле 2024 года, когда Совет под российским
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Q&A mic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
80 лет назад, 4 февраля 1945 года, Is there a translation? 4 февраля 1945 года открылась Ялтинская конференция. В ходе этой эпохальной встречи были определены контуры послевоенного мироустройства, центром которого была определена Организация Объединенных Наций. В международно-правовой плоскости Устав Всемирной Организации впервые поставил знак равенства между всеми государствами, избавив мир от легитимизации притязаний отдельных стран на доминирующее положение. Результатом этого прорывного решения стал процесс деколонизации, подаривший свободу многочисленным порабощенным народам. Кроме того, при всех своих сильных и слабых сторонах, о которых до сих пор спорят политики и ученые, ООН в целом справлялась со своей главной задачей – предотвращением новой глобальной войны. Однако сегодня мир как никогда близко подошел к опасной черте и балансирует на грани прямого вооруженного столкновения ядерных держав. Запад, действуя в русле порядка, основанного на правилах, согласовывает в обход ООН решения по важным для большинства стран темам, а затем выдает их за универсальные рецепты и навязывает остальным. Тем самым происходит сознательный подрыв авторитета Всемирной организации и верховенства международного права в регулировании международных отношений. Самое широкое применение получила практика односторонних ограничительных мер, которые применяются всякий раз, когда сторонники силовых методов мировой политики не могут протащить желаемое решение через Совет Безопасности. Примером тому является ситуация с Ираном. После истечения ряда ограничений в рамках резолюции 2231 в октябре 2024 года европейские страны не предприняли практических шагов по отмене рестрикций против Ирана, продлив их бессрочно на национальном уровне. Хотим напомнить, что единственным органом, уполномоченным на введение санкций, является Совет Безопасности. Корейском полуострове и давно подлежат серьезному пересмотру. Неподчинение Уставу ООН и безответственное отношение к решениям Совета Безопасности по самым острым международным вопросам стало визитной карточкой Запада. Из плохо скрываемых откровений многих западных политиков и дипломатов следует, что для их столиц резолюции Совета ничего не стоят. Они с завидной регулярностью не выполняются или попросту считаются необязательными. За такими действиями стоит навязчивое желание сохранить неоколониальную систему эксплуатации, позволяющую его правящим элитам и финансово-промышленному капиталу паразитировать на разграблении развивающихся стран. Россия прикладывает усилия по продвижению антиколониальной и антинеоколониальной повесток в ООН, включая принятие тематической резолюции Генеральной Ассамблеи в декабре 2024 года. В контексте усилий по урегулированию украинского кризиса становится понятно, кто искренне выступает за более справедливый, свободный и равноправный мир, а кто живет прошлым и старается любой ценой воплотить в жизнь свои геополитические установки. Любое государство, претендующее на роль посредника и выступающее с мирными инициативами, должно прежде всего ясно понимать, с чего начался этот конфликт. Его первопричина в игнорировании законов и интересов России в области безопасности, стремление нанести ей стратегическое поражение. а также в несоблюдении пришедшим к власти в результате антиконституционного государственного переворота киевским режимом прав русскоязычного, прав всего населения Украины и обязательств любого нормального правительства перед всеми своими гражданами. Параллельно с достижением целей специальной военной операции Россия выступает за создание системы неделимой и равной безопасности в Евразии, в рамках которой все государства будут уверены в собственной безопасности и не будут пытаться обеспечить ее в ущерб интересам других. Выдвинутая президентом России инициатива по данному вопросу созвучна идеям и предложениям многих стран, расположенных на нашем общем континенте. Не вызывает сомнений, что комплексный подход к многосторонности зиждется на целях и принципах Устава ООН. Одновременно, по мере формирования многостороннего мироустройства со сдвигом центров силы в сторону глобального юга, растет потребность в адаптации институтов глобального управления к современным реалиям и в первую очередь в реформе ООН и ее Совета Безопасности. Выступаем в пользу увеличения представленности в Совете Безопасности государств Африки, Азии и Латинской Америки. Безосновательное доминирование в Совете стран Запада, как наследников колониальных метрополий, должно уйти в прошлое. Тектонические сдвиги наблюдаются в мировой экономике. Доля стран БРИКС в глобальном ВВП 37 с лишним %, опередила долю стран группы 7, менее 30%. Реформа глобальной финансовой архитектуры должна отражать эти процессы. Особое значение имеет скорейшее реформирование бреттон-вудских институтов и ВТО, работа которых должна выстраиваться с учетом реального веса незападных центров экономического роста. И что же мы видим в этой сфере? Лишь попытки стран ОЭСР не допустить значимых реформ и уцепиться за существующую систему, которая позволяет использовать финансовые инструменты как оружие массового поражения, что усиливает фрагментацию мировой экономики. Продолжается колониальная практика навязывания идеологических установок и политических решений, социально-экономических моделей, нацеленных на ограбление суверенных государств. По имеющимся оценкам, развитые страны выкачали из стран глобального юга со времени принятия декларации о деколонизации 1960 года ресурсов на общую сумму в $62 триллиона. Развязана беспрецедентная кампания односторонних принудительных мер, от которых страдают страны в Африке, Азии и Латинской Америке. Серьезный удар по глобальной финансовой системе наносит и прямое воровство странами Запада суверенных активов и валютных резервов. Вместе с этим в ход идут и ограничения на доступ к технологиям, что прямо противоречит подлинной многосторонности, усугубляет неравенство и закладывает мину замедленного действия, подрывая перспективы достижения целей устойчивого развития. Растущее недоверие к финансовой системе, основанной на западных резервных валютах, и намечающийся отток средств из ценных бумаг и долговых обязательств западных государств и крупных банков подталкивают процессы активизации региональных связей, формирования эффективных и безопасных многосторонних внешнеэкономических механизмов, альтернативных тем, которые контролируют и используют в своих корыстных интересах Запад. Это в том числе предполагает расширение расчетов в национальных валютах, создание независимых платежных систем и выстраивание производственно-сбытовых цепочек в обход каналов, заблокированных или скомпрометированных в результате политически мотивированных ограничений. Межрегиональные и региональные организации и их партнерства, по нашему мнению, имеют потенциал стать стержневыми регулирующими институтами многополярного миропорядка. Такой подход закреплен предложенный президентом Путиным концепцией большого евразийского партнерства, экономического фундамента нашей инициативы единой неделимой безопасности в Евразии. Несомненно, важная роль на этом направлении принадлежит БРИКС, ШОС, а также СНГ, Евразийскому экономическому союзу, АСЕАН и другим объединениям. Прекрасным примером международного регионального взаимодействия является деятельность БАПОР, которая уже многие десятилетия оказывает поддержку палестинцам в сферах гуманитарного содействия, образования, здравоохранения и социальных услуг на оккупированной палестинской территории. По сути, делает все то, чем обязаны заниматься оккупирующие власти Западного Иерусалима, ведущие беспрецедентную травлю БАПОР. Бесперебойная и устойчивая работа агентства – залог выживания для миллионов жителей сектора Газа и западного берега реки Иордан. Сегодня БАПОР для газовитян – единственная оставшаяся в жизни опора, альтернативы которой не было и нет. Наш долг – защитить мандат агентства в интересах продолжения его уникальной работы по оказанию помощи палестинцам как на ОПТ, так и в соседних арабских странах. В этой связи поддерживаем призыв Генерального секретаря ООН и Генерального комиссара БАПОР к Израилю соблюдать свои международно-правовые обязательства и отменить законы Кнессета о запрете деятельности агентства. Очевидно, что важным стимулирующим фактором укрепления многосторонности становятся множащиеся глобальные вызовы перед человечеством. От кризиса в сфере здравоохранения до проникновения в нашу жизнь бесконтрольных цифровых технологий, от изменения климата до так называемого демографического перехода, а по сути, как считают некоторые эксперты, демографического суицида для все большего количества наций. ООН призвана играть центральную координирующую роль в выработке адекватных решений с привлечением всех заинтересованных сторон, а деполитизированное международное научное сотрудничество предоставить убедительную и долгосрочную базу для принятия такого рода решений. Непосредственно в деле достижения целей устойчивого развития серьезные надежды возлагаются на предстоящую 4-ю международную конференцию по финансированию развития в Испании в июле сего года. Среди других приоритетных вопросов отмечаем проблематику цифрового разрыва. Выступаем за налаживание межгосударственного диалога и наращивание активности профильных международных организаций с целью сокращения цифрового неравенства, содействия развивающимся странам в развитии национального законодательства и высокотехнологической инфраструктуры в области цифровой экономики. Дискуссии на все обозначенные нами темы должны выстраиваться без скатывания в бесплодную полемику, иначе ощутимых результатов достичь не удастся. Необходимо восстановить профессиональную дипломатию, культуру диалога, умение слушать и слышать, сохранять каналы кризисной коммуникации. Точка опоры есть, это устав нашей организации. Если все без исключения будут следовать его духу и букве, а не трактовать его выборочно в угоду своим геополитическим интересам, объединенным нациям по силам преодолеть текущие разногласия и прийти к общему знаменателю по большинству вопросов. Благодарю вас.
感谢俄罗斯代表的发言，下面请法国代表发言。
Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie pour l'organisation de cette réunion. Alors que la gouvernance mondiale est mise au défi par la multiplication des crises, nous ne devons pas céder à la tentation de l'unilatéralisme. Ceci nous conduirait à la confrontation généralisée de tous contre tous, au détriment de chacun, même de celui qui se croit le plus fort. La France réaffirme son soutien au multilatéralisme, au respect du droit international et aux valeurs de coopération et de solidarité. En septembre dernier, nous avons adopté le Pacte pour l'avenir afin de revitaliser le multilatéralisme et accélérer la réalisation de l'agenda 2030. Alors que nous nous apprêtons à célébrer le 80e anniversaire des Nations Unies, ce document réaffirme qu'une réponse collective est nécessaire pour répondre aux défis actuels et à ceux de demain. Dans cet esprit, la France a organisé le sommet pour un nouveau pacte financier et au début du mois de février de cette année, le sommet pour l'action sur l'intelligence artificielle. Nous devons repenser notre système de gouvernance pour le rendre plus efficace, plus représentatif et plus juste. Il nous faut aussi aller plus loin en matière de climat et de biodiversité. Cette méthode continue de produire des résultats, comme l'illustre l'adoption du traité BBNJ en 2023. Il y a 10 ans, 195 États réunis à Paris avaient décidé d'accélérer de manière décisive la lutte contre le dérèglement climatique avec pour objectif de limiter l'augmentation de la température moyenne à 1,5 degré Celsius. Nous devons tous nous remettre en ordre de bataille pour traduire en actes l'accord de Paris. Monsieur le Président, c'est parce que la France a confiance dans les Nations Unies qu'elle défend une réforme ambitieuse. S'agissant du Conseil de sécurité, notre position est claire, un élargissement dans les deux catégories de membres afin de préserver sa légitimité et de renforcer sa représentativité. Il est anormal que l'Afrique ne soit pas représentée parmi les permanents. Cela doit changer. La France défend depuis 20 ans, comme le prévoit le modèle du G4, que 2 États africains siègent parmi les permanents. Je réaffirme ici qu'il est légitime qu'ils demandent le droit de veto. Le Conseil de sécurité doit pouvoir agir et remplir son rôle dans le maintien de la paix et de la sécurité internationale. Les attentes de la communauté internationale sont fortes pour la Palestine, pour l'Ukraine, pour le Soudan et pour tant d'autres régions dans le monde. Nous devons faire plus. La France considère que le droit de veto n'est pas un privilège discrétionnaire, mais une responsabilité particulière. C'est dans cet esprit qu'elle porte depuis 2015 avec le Mexique une initiative d'encadrement du veto en cas d'atrocité de masse, c'est-à-dire en cas de génocide, de crimes contre l'humanité et de crimes de guerre de grande ampleur. 106 États ont déjà apporté leur soutien à cette initiative et nous nous sommes engagés dans le pacte pour l'avenir à intensifier nos efforts sur cette question. Soyons à la hauteur des attentes dans ce domaine. Je vous remercie.
我感谢法国代表的发言，下面我请英国代表发言。
Thank you, President, and I welcome the contributions to our discussion today from His Excellency Foreign Minister Wang Yi and the Secretary-General. The United Kingdom remains deeply committed to the United Nations, but 80 years since its creation, with more countries engaged in conflict than ever before, we're falling short of its founding mission to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. And despite progress on health and education, significant global challenges remain. The climate crisis is accelerating, and the Sustainable Development Goals are off track. Why so? There is more to this than the often mentioned liquidity crisis. In 80 years, UN membership has increased from 51 to 193 member states. But the UN and its institutions are not fully representative of all its members. We now live in a multipolar world, not a bipolar or a unipolar one, and whose challenges, climate, pandemics, cybersecurity, are more transnational than national. As the Secretary-General reminded us, and so many speakers today have reiterated, the Pact of the Future demonstrated a clear desire and a clear commitment to reinvigorate the multilateral system, including through reforming the UN and the international financial system. Together, we need to redouble our efforts and find new ways to address emerging challenges. 2025, the UN's 80th anniversary and a year of key summits, is the first step on this path. Next month, we have the Commission on the Status of Women and the Beijing Plus 30 meeting. In June, we have the UN Oceans Conference. In July, Financing for Development 4. And later in the year, we have the UN Social Summit and COP30 back in Brazil. Together, these summits seek to address our shared concerns. Their success is critical for progress and the UN's reputation as our multilateral home. Second, we need to use the UN more effectively to deliver international peace and security. Such progress must go hand in hand with upholding human rights. This starts, first and foremost, with the defence of the UN Charter, as colleagues have referenced. Nowhere is that more true today than in Ukraine, whose sovereignty and territorial integrity is under threat from Russian aggression. We must work to ensure that all UN tools, including its good offices, are used to deliver and advance peace. For example, Personal Envoy Lamamra has a crucial platform to bring together the warring parties in Sudan. We encourage reinvigorated momentum for mediation efforts, as well as renewed focus on prevention to reduce crises before they happen. This year's Peacebuilding Architecture Review is an important opportunity in this regard. We also need to refresh our peacekeeping approach to ensure missions are fit for purpose and defend UN peacekeepers wherever they serve. Attacks against them are unacceptable. And we honour in particular today MONUSCO peacekeepers who have fallen in defence of civilians in the DRC. Finally, in the face of growing global crises from Sudan to Myanmar, we need to support the UN's development and humanitarian programmes across its agencies. In Gaza, UNRWA, alongside the WFP and UNICEF, provides over 50% of all food aid. We commend OCHA's tireless efforts to reach those in need. Humanitarian access and the protection of aid workers are integral to their successful delivery. In conclusion, President, colleagues, this Council is often characterised as an ineffective geopolitical theatre. While reform of its membership is needed, and the UK supports that, this body has the tools to implement its peace and security mandate. We now need to strengthen our collective will to use them more effectively and, as the Secretary-General has said, in our 80th year, work to build the more peaceful, just and prosperous world that we know is within reach. I thank you.
我感谢英国代表的发言，下面我请美国代表发言。
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this meeting to review where the UN stands on its principles and purpose as we go into its 80th year. The United States helped found the United Nations after World War II to prevent future global conflicts and promote international peace and security. But UN agencies and bodies overall have drifted from their core missions. We need to take a closer look at where this institution is falling short. For example, there is a long-standing, deep anti-Israel bias within the UN that has only grown stronger since Hamas's brutal attack against Israel on October 7th, 2023. This sentiment was exemplified by the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, when staff were found to have participated in the October 7th terrorist attack. There are even recent reports that its schools and facilities have been used by Hamas. The UN Human Rights Council has protected human rights abusers by allowing them to use the organization to shield themselves from scrutiny. As for the Security Council, it is charged with maintaining international peace and security, but critical issues that demand the Council's attention continually fall by the wayside. Prior to Bashar al-Assad's departure from Syria, Russia used the Security Council to block any action to hold the Assad regime to account for its crimes against humanity. Russia's war in Ukraine is the bloodiest in Europe since the founding of the United Nations after World War II. This war needs to end. China has consistently exploited its status as a developing nation within international organizations to advance its separate agenda. The UN should not be in the business of endorsing any one country's initiatives. So, two of the greatest drivers of instability in the world today hold veto power at the Security Council. That is what we are up against. As mentioned at the outset, the United States has supported the United Nations over these 80 years. We will continue to strongly advocate for peace abroad and for security and stability at home. The United States is currently conducting a review of our support to the UN. We will consider whether the actions of the organization are serving American interests and whether it can be reformed. The United States will not support UN bodies such as the UN Human Rights Council. We will review bodies such as UNESCO, which has a history of anti-Semitism or anti-Israel sentiment within the organization. Colleagues, we are seeing the abuse of international structures for political ends, including by using the International Court of Justice advisory opinions as a way to pursue national agendas. The ICJ has been used by South Africa to accuse Israel of genocide. Unfortunately, the term genocide has been misappropriated to become an international slander. Mr. President, as we look at the tools available to us to promote economic and social development, we need to harness the power of artificial intelligence, which will have countless revolutionary applications in economic innovation, national security, healthcare, and free expression. America welcomes partnerships with UN member states that foster the creation of AI technology, but we must guard against strangling the development of AI with needless regulations. We must also be wary of attempts to use AI algorithms to rewrite history, surveil users, and censor speech. Mr. President, a few words about sanctions, or so-called illegal unilateral coercive measures. The United States reiterates that its autonomous sanctions programs are consistent with international law. In addition to observing and respecting UN sanctions, the United States and many of our partners legitimately use domestic authorities, carefully regulating our domestic financial systems in a tailored way to address threats to international peace and security. In doing so, we go to tremendous lengths to avoid humanitarian impacts or impacts on the flows of life-saving food and medicine to those in need. Mr. President, in conclusion, the United States supports the UN's return to its founding mission of promoting peace and security around the world. As President Trump has stated, we will be taking a hard look over the next few months on what reforms the UN needs to undertake to get us to that point. I thank you.
感谢美国代表团的发言。下面我请斯洛文尼亚代表发言。
Thank you, Mr. President. We are encouraged by the leadership of China in organizing today's debate, and we thank Secretary General for his briefing earlier. Colleagues, soon we will mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. Devastation and suffering caused by the war led the leaders to unite and establish the UN with the noble motivation, quote, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, end of quote. Our organization and hope for a peaceful future raised as a phoenix out of the ashes of the war, as beautifully depicted by Per Krog's mural for peace hanging in the chamber just behind us or above us. However, as if the core to the raison d'etre of our organization has loosened with time, and as if we are not capable anymore to imagine peace. The conflicts are running at an all-time high. The UN Charter, the international law, international humanitarian law, and the resolutions of this Council are all being undermined and right out violate it or ignore without any accountability. Since we have entered the Security Council a year ago, we have been asking ourselves how to revive the spirit of San Francisco. Like Guyana, we are asking ourselves how to rebuild the trust among ourselves.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Karen Mazurkiewicz. I'm the Vice President of Stakeholder Relations and Communications for Toronto Pearson. Today, Toronto Pearson CEO and President Deborah Flint will be providing an update on airport operations and the investigation following Monday's incident. We also have several representatives from our first responder agencies, as well as our COO of Toronto Pearson Operations. So behind me are Peel Regional Police Deputy Chief Mark Andrews, Peel Paramedics Commander of Operations Corey Tokach, Mississauga Fire Chief Darren Reedsey, and Toronto Pearson's Fire Chief Todd Aiken, and Khalil Laramet from our COO of Toronto Pearson. With that, I'd like to welcome Toronto Pearson CEO Deborah Flint, who will take a couple of questions after her remarks. Following that, our first responders are available to also answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and good morning to all. We are providing a third update this morning on yesterday's events as the accident transitions to the investigation phase, and I will share more on that investigation phase and what to expect shortly. First, however, it's really important to recognize how grateful we are that there was no loss of life or life-threatening injuries in yesterday's accident. You know, every time you board a flight, you are greeted by flight attendants and by flight crew often. It's their job to make us comfortable and confident about the flight ahead, and they do an incredible job with that. But we saw the most important role that they play in action yesterday. The crew of Delta Flight 4819 heroically led passengers to safety, evacuating a jet that had overturned on the runway on landing that was amidst smoke and fire. I thank each and every one of these heroes, every flight attendant and crew member on Delta Flight 4819. I also thank every flight attendant and crew member across the industry. Thank you for all that you do every day and every night in service of safe air travel. In regards to the accident yesterday, at approximately 2:15 p.m., Delta Airlines Flight 4819 from Minneapolis to Toronto, operated by subsidiary Endeavour Air, was involved in a single aircraft accident upon landing at Toronto Pearson. The plane was carrying 4 crew and 76 passengers, among them 22 Canadians. Flight attendants, flight crews, and airport emergency workers and responders mounted a textbook response, reaching the site within minutes and quickly evacuating the passengers. At the time, there were 21 injured passengers, ranging from minor to critical but not life-threatening injuries. A total of 19 passengers went to the local hospitals, with 2 more going to hospitals in the time period after. At this time, Delta Airlines has reported that 19 of those passengers have been released and 2 remain hospitalized. Our thoughts go out to all of the passengers impacted and their families. We have taken great time and care to extend care to each of the passengers that were here after the accident. That includes comfort as well as support in their emotional well-being in the hours since the crash. We have completed the reunification process for all of the remaining passengers, and we'll continue to care for them during this extended time. I will now give you more information about the operation and what to expect in the days ahead. From last Thursday to Sunday, Toronto Pearson saw extreme conditions, 2 separate snowstorms. On Thursday and Sunday, we got more than 20 inches, 50 centimeters of accumulated snow. That is actually not typical. In fact, it is more snow within that time window than we received in all of last winter. There were many delays and cancellations across this part of Canada and the U.S. Northeast during this time, creating numerous flight delays and backlogs. At Toronto Pearson, 221 of 974 scheduled flights were canceled on Thursday. 75 of 1,012 scheduled flights were canceled on Friday. 128 of 937 scheduled flights were canceled on Saturday, and 371 of 987 on Sunday. Monday was a clear day, though, and it was an operational recovery day for Toronto Pearson, with 1,006 scheduled flights. The results yesterday, in due part to the accident, were 462 scheduled flights canceled and 544 flights operated. Let's now talk about the investigation and what to expect in the next few days as we pivot to this phase. Last night, 7 members of the Transportation Safety Board of Canada arrived at Toronto Pearson to begin the investigation. 13 more of those investigators arrived today. Members of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration are also here on site, participating in the investigation. As it is a Mitsubishi aircraft, Mitsubishi will be here on site as well, and Delta Airlines has sent their GO team who are already here on site. So what does this all mean for operations at Toronto Pearson today and in the days ahead? Our Emergency Operations Center does remain open, though operations on the runways resumed at 5 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday. We have been in recovery mode since resuming flights at 5 p.m. yesterday, catching up on delayed flights, and that continues into today as well. We are currently without use of our longest east-west and north-south runways. This and ongoing expected additional weather conditions today will affect how fast we recover operations, particularly with departure of aircraft. We do expect that the investigators on site will be reviewing the aircraft on its current configuration on the runway for the next 48 hours. And we are looking to get to support that investigation and the removal of that aircraft off the runway, at which point we can do our inspections and then return that runway into service. Toronto Pearson will continue to provide you all with operational updates, but this is now an active investigation time, and you can expect to start hearing more from the investigating authorities about the accident that happened here. We expect that the Transportation Safety Board of Canada will be issuing a statement with more information around that later this afternoon. In closing, I thank the industry, the community, and all of our employees here and across the sector for all the work that they are doing to support this incident and those affected, and that they do every day. Air travel remains the safest form of transportation. We are proud of that record here, and at times like these, we're very grateful and thankful of how the community and the industry comes together as one. Thank you.
We'll now take a few questions.
Los derechos humanos.
Folks who maybe can come up to... Okay.
La ampliación de los miembros.
Hi there, Alex Capriello with News Nation. A question about the conditions yesterday. Obviously, you just explained the extent of the snowstorms that came over the past few days. Wondering if there's been any developments or any comment about what exactly it was like on the runway in terms of iciness or wind gusts. Last night we heard the fire chief say that he did not believe that that played a role in this crash at all. Is that still the theory here? And if so, do we have any developments on what caused the crash if it wasn't weather related?
Yeah, this would not be a time for us to have theory or to speculate on what caused the crash. So as I shared, we have a number of agencies that are here that are responsible for doing a thorough and full and complete investigation to determine all the causal factors, and we are looking forward to getting those results and to sharing those, and those will be shared very publicly once they are received.
And I understand that if you don't want to speculate about the crash, but can you tell us then what the condition of the runway was like at that time of the impact? I mean, was it slick? Have your teams been able to determine that?
I look forward to sharing all of that information at the proper time. Again, those are all the details that are going to be covered during this investigation, and that is active currently.
Hi there, Vio Saisai from the New York Times. I have one question and a follow-up. Does air traffic control handle CRJs differently than other aircraft in crosswinds?
The air traffic control is responsible, NAV Canada, for all of the aircraft activity here at Toronto Pearson and in the surrounding areas. They will have to respond differently themselves as to how they manage those aircraft uniquely.
And then how do you decide to pause operations because of wind, and who makes that decision?
That is a cross-collected decision that is made between NAV Canada and the pilots during live operations. We are not pausing operations. We do have a slowdown in the operations due to 2 of our runways being closed for operations at this time, and those are the key contributing factors to the delays.
Last question. There's no Delta or TSB representatives on the stage with you right now. Are you able to speak to why they're not present?
We've been very much in communication with all of those involved, all of the agencies, Delta Airlines and others. We've all had quite extensive communication. They've been in our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center. So the system and the response to the accident is working as planned and going quite well with our partners.
John Warren with the Associated Press. 2 questions. One is the 2 people who remain in the hospital. Any timeline on how long they may remain?
I do not have that information.
Do you know what condition they're in?
What we do know is that, again, 19 of those that were hospitalized are no longer hospitalized. The 2 that remain, none face life-threatening injuries from what we've been briefed and what Delta Airlines has released as well.
And just finally, Deborah, given what we saw from all the videos that are on social media, and I'm sure what you've seen internally, how is it more remarkable that everyone was able to survive this incident?
There are so many factors that lead us to have gratitude today. Again, I cannot commend enough the crew, the flight attendants, pilots, and our emergency responders for their quick and effective response. It's really incredible, and when you see that aircraft, it just makes you really thankful for all the safety checks that go into running this one of the world's safest air transportation systems.
Okay, we'll take questions now for the first responders, please.
Good morning, Momin Qureshi from 680 News Radio. My question really is, last check, the wreckage was still out there on the runway. I just wanted to know if we know how long that will be out there and what kind of impact that's having on service here at the airport.
Yeah, so as I shared, yes, that the remains of the aircraft will remain on the runway while the investigators are performing their reviews. We expect that could be about 48 hours. And so until that time, 2 of our runways will remain closed, and that is affecting the volume of traffic that we're having. So passengers should be looking and working with their airlines, checking our website for information on delays and potential cancellations as well for the next several days.
Just as a follow-up to that, then, I've been upstairs, as many of us have, talking to passengers, and many of them, most of them, all of them really are understanding of the ripple effect, but are extremely frustrated by the lack of information or conflicting information. So just what do you say to your passengers right now who are trying to get themselves on flights to their destinations, but are left feeling frustrated by conflicting information or a lack of information?
We are here very much at the airport to support and provide passenger care for people that might find themselves here at their airport and have their flights disrupted. So we'll continue to provide that customer care for them. But in the interim, please do check with your airlines, check your website, and check your apps for your most updated flight information.
Thank you. We'll move now to questions to the responders. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. It's Shauna with City News. Can you talk a little bit about the response, how long it took fire trucks to get to the plane, and can you talk a little bit about the flame that we saw in the video and the smoke, and was it easy to put out? And just really take us through the response.
All right, Todd.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The actual time, it was a very quick response from Toronto Pearson Fire Emergency Services. Upon arrival, the crew did witness spot fires. They were able to quickly knock down the spot fires using the aircraft rescue firefighting apparatus. Once the fires were knocked down, the crews did make entry and perform primary search and rescue. The passengers were all evacuated, and then they were taken to a secondary location at Station 2 for triage with our mutual aid partners.
Just a quick follow-up. Can you describe what it was like? Because we've seen videos of the passengers hanging upside down in their seatbelts. Can you maybe just describe what it was like to get these people, hanging, cut down, and out of the plane?
I believe that most of the passengers self-evacuated at that time, and upon arrival, they were being escorted to a second location.
Hello, Nate Foy, Fox News. I'm just seeking some clarity from a first responder's perspective on the elements in your efforts yesterday. I know a lot of people are hoping for some clarity on what the fire chief said, and it sounds like you guys won't give us that, but can you tell me what it was like out there on the runway as you were doing your job? Was the runway dry, and the wind gust, how did it impact you?
And like we mentioned, it's very early to make any conclusions. I know I provided a little bit of information yesterday for transparency. Today, now we have an active investigation. Therefore, any of those questions would have to be directed toward Transportation Safety Board.
Hi there, Karen Lieberman with Global News. Besides the chief, I just wondered if any of the other first responders can speak to their own experiences and what you found and how you cared for some of these passengers.
Sure.
Thank you for the question. Mark Andrews, Deputy Chief of Peel Regional Police. I'd like to, before I answer the question, I'd like to say that our thoughts and prayers are with the 76 crew members and 4 passengers and their families that were impacted by yesterday's events, which fortunately had the best possible outcome for all of us. Our response as Peel Regional Police, we're the police of jurisdiction. We have a really robust presence here at the airport. We actually have a fully functioning division with 100 officers and civilians located. We have a presence on the public side and the private side. So we were able to respond in a very timely fashion along with our first responder partners. The conditions were difficult, but I will say this, that we regularly practice with our partners in fire and EMS and the GTAA and Transport Safety Canada. So we were prepared for this event, as extreme as it was. And our men and women, not only in policing, but across all the first responder services, did a tremendous job. And in my mind, no doubt saved lives. So I'd like to acknowledge that. There was some impact, on the police of jurisdiction being ourselves, not only here at the airport, because as you can imagine, we don't have surge capacity to deal with something like this the way they do in the private industry. We had, at one point we had 50 police officers responding to the circumstances here at the airport and the surrounding environment. What I'd like to do is thank our partners at the OPP, Commissioner Tom Creek and Chief Myron Demke, because they supported us through the aftermath of the incident. Officers to support both of our public. All in all, it was a great response by first responders supporting GTAA and our TSB partners, but it's something that we've practiced and we're well prepared for should this happen again going forward.
Mississauga Fire and Communications Services received the 911 call. It's called a crash alarm, so we get it directly from Pearson. into our communications center. So we had a very quick response. We had 6 apparatus from Mississauga Fire respond. It was a combination of aerials, engines, and squads. In addition, we sent our command vehicle and also a tanker. We also had an acting platoon chief, a district chief, and myself that attended the scene. I took a position within their emergency operations center. Just to reiterate what Deputy just said, annually our firefighters at a location called Festi. It's a training facility. Our primary response is to assist with water supply, search and rescue, rehab, and medical support. The Mississauga Fire and Emergency Services and Mississauga Office of Emergency Management participates in 2 annual emergency exercises that are held at Toronto Pearson International Airport each year, including a high-level tabletop command exercise and a full-scale boots-on-the-ground emergency exercise. In addition to the exercises conducted each year at Toronto Pearson International Airport, the City of Mississauga conducts its own functional emergency exercise, and we did that in 2021, examining an aircraft accident occurring within the City of Mississauga. This exercise included partners from various organizations, including those represented in the exercises held here regularly at Pearson. The Mississauga Fire and Emergency Services and OEM provides emergency management training to regional partners from various organizations who may be involved in the response to an aircraft accident, amongst other emergencies. The Mississauga Office of Emergency Management can also serve as a conduit between the city and the Provincial Emergency Operations Center if provincial-wide coordination for the response and recovery of community impacts during an emergency is required. During an aircraft accident, the Mississauga Office of Emergency Management can assist in the coordination of providing municipal services if requested by our community partners who may be impacted in the event. This could include transportation like buses, facilities, or heavy equipment. The City of Mississauga has developed its own aircraft accident emergency plan, which conforms with and operates in conjunction to the airport emergency plan developed by the Greater Toronto Airport Authority.
Thanks. That was a fulsome response.
I just also wondered if anyone can speak to the nature of some of the injuries.
Do you want to speak to some of the nature?
Good afternoon. My name is Corey Takach. I'm a commander of operations within Peel Regional Paramedic Services. So upon our arrival of the crash site, our staff were faced with a multitude of different injuries, mainly stemming from back sprains, head injuries, anxiety, some headaches, nausea and vomiting due to the fuel exposure. So those were the common sort of injuries that we had come across.
Any more questions?
Please, Mal Hamidi, Canadian Press. Just want to follow up on this rescue effort. Can you please provide some details on the timeline? How long did you, paramedics and firefighters did it take for them to get to the airplane, and how long did it take for them to evacuate the airplane?
Okay, Todd, you want to take that?
Yeah, the response from Toronto Pearson Fire Emergency Services was minutes. Because there was an active investigation, we won't be able to provide the details, but it was a very quick response from Fire Emergency Services as well as our response partners that just spoke.
Can you please also comment on the role that flight attendants played in evacuating the airplane? We saw some videos on social media where basically doing their job, helping passengers get off the plane. Can you please comment on their role in this?
Sure, absolutely. We train for such events. We're very well prepared and trained, and the firefighters responded textbook. They were able to knock down the fire They're able to assist the passengers getting off the plane and then performing triage and then response to the hospitals.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Alex Miller with Scripps News. I know you can't confirm what you saw on the runway, but can you confirm that the runway had been coded as fives across the board as a wet runway for the pilots, which is a runway with light snow or slush?
Sorry, I don't know if I followed that question. Do you want an answer or do you want to repeat it? Did you get it?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, because there's an active investigation, that will have to be directed towards the Transport Safety Board, please.
Hi, Jessica Murphy, BBC News. I want to go back to something Mr. Andrews said. You talked about difficult conditions that rescuers faced on the ground. I'm hoping you could go into a bit more detail.
Sorry, with who said? Sorry?
BBC. Oh,
no, sorry.
Peel Regional Police.
Peel Regional Police.
Thank you for that question. The conditions that I was speaking of is the environmental conditions, the cold, the wind, the fact that we were still having the occasional snow. But those are conditions, again, that we're used to working in as first responders, and our people, along with the other first responders, did a tremendous job of responding in those conditions. It's part of the environment that we operate in.
Megan Fitzpatrick from CBC News. What can you tell us about the child that was airlifted to sick kids? Do we know if the child was on somebody's lap or buckled in? What can you tell us about the nature of their injuries?
No, we don't. I'm sorry.
You don't know if the child was on a lap?
No, we don't have those details.
Can you give us an age range of the passengers on the plane?
We don't have that either. I would direct that to Delta.
We're going to take two more questions.
Okay.
And just one more on of the two that are in hospital, is one of them the child?
We're not sure either.
I have a quick question for fire. Flammable is it? How much time did that give you to tame it?
Okay. Did you hear the question? Okay. It's on the jet fuel, like
Yes.
whether they were.
Yes. Upon arrival, there was jet fuel and there was flames. We do have specialized aircraft rescue firefighting equipment that carries water, foam, and dry chem, and that it is utilized to smother and cover up the jet fuel to provide mean-free egress for the passengers. So we do have the appropriate equipment and the appropriate training to mitigate that emergency.
Okay, we'll take the last question.
Just like a last question on the nature of the injuries. The people who were more seriously injured, those who were at one point in critical condition, what type of injuries were those? Are we talking about like broken bones, serious sprains?
I think the paramedic did speak to that a bit, but he can come back and reiterate.
Yeah. So on the initial assessment in any mass casualty incident, we do a triage of patients. And yes, some patients were deemed to be critical at that time. And we make that assessment based on our initial contact, what the patient's complaining of, the fact that they were involved in a plane crash. And some of those determinations happen quite quickly in the short amount of time that we spend with that patient to ensure that they're receiving the quickest care possible. And there are times when further care occurs and those conditions get downgraded. So from critical to like serious and non-life threatening. There are times in scenarios like this where somebody may be complaining of like abdominal pain or a head injury, and we may err on the side of caution to deem them critical because we can't see inside their skull, we can't see inside their abdomen, but based on some of their vital signs and other determining factors, that's when sort of the decision to make them a critical patient would have occurred.
So in terms of like the acuity of injuries, perhaps the most acute would be that like the back sprain or the head injury possible.
Yeah, a head injury from an acuity state is obviously very dangerous. The issue is we obviously can't see inside the head at that time, right? So.
Well, thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it. I really thank all the responders as well for their time to come today and explain the situation on the ground. We will continue to give more updates on operations, Toronto Pearson, but from this going forward now, it is an active investigation, and we can expect hopefully to hear some news from the investigators. Thank you.
سيد الرئيس، في ظل التحولات والتغيرات التي يمر بها عالمنا، بات من الضروري التحرك نحو تعزيز قدرة النظام الدولي على صون السلم والأمن الدوليين وفقا لما هو منصوص عليه في ميثاق الأمم المتحدة. وبلا شك فإن التحديات المتزايدة التي يواجهها المجتمع الدولي والأحداث الدامية الراهنة تتطلب أقصى درجات الفاعلية في التعاطي والتجاوب من قبل النظام المتعدد، وعلى رأسه مجلس الأمن الذي يقع على عاتقه التفاعل بحيادية وموضوعية مع جميع القضايا وفقا للولاية المناط بها. وتؤكد المملكة العربية السعودية على ضرورة الجمع بين عامل الفاعلية من جهة وعامل التعددية وسلامة التمثيل من جهة ثانية في أي مسعى جاد لإصلاح الحوكمة العالمية واستكمالها. إننا بحاجة إلى تمثيل أفضل لمختلف مناطق العالم ومشاركة أكبر للدول النامية في اعتماد الأجندة العالمية وبلورة القرارات بشأنها، كما أننا في الوقت ذاته نحتاج أن نضمن أن تكون أعمال الأمم المتحدة ذات فعالية حقيقية في حفظ الأمن والسلم وترسيخ التعاون الدولي الذي لا يمكن بدونه لأي دولة منفردة أن تتوصل إلى حلول فعالة وناجحة. وفي هذا الإطار فإن المملكة العربية السعودية تعيد التأكيد على أن المفاوضات الحكومية الدولية حول إصلاح النظام المتعدد ينبغي أن تكون من خلال الجمعية العامة وفقا لقرار الجمعية العامة 62/557 والذي تم اعتماده بتوافق الآراء. إن مسألة التعسف في استعمال حق النقد ومسألة عدالة التمثيل وتوسيع عضوية مجلس الأمن أضحت أمور ملحة تستوجب العمل بجدية وموضوعية نحو تنفيذها وضمان تمثيل متكافئ للمجموعات الجغرافية والإقليمية. سيد الرئيس، نحن نشهد اليوم تناميا في أزمة الثقة بقدرة الأمم المتحدة وهيئاتها وخاصة مجلس الأمن على الاطلاع بمسؤولياتها في حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين وحل النزاعات بالطرق السلمية، وهذا يستدعي منا جميعا تقييم الوضع الراهن الذي تتراجع فيه فعالية العمل الدولي متعدد الأطراف، وضرورة اقتراح أفضل السبل للإصلاح وتعزيز الفاعلية والتعددية والقدرة على الاستجابة السريعة لمواجهة الأزمات وتخطي العقبات. وبلا شك فإن جهود الفريق العامل المعني بالوثائق الإجرائية الأخرى IWG ومسار تحديث المذكرة 507 الخاصة بتطوير أساليب مجلس الأمن يمثلان خطوة في الاتجاه الصحيح نحو تحسين أساليب عمل مجلس الأمن، لا سيما في التبعيات السلبية لاستخدام حق النقد الفيتو في تحقيق السلم والأمن الدوليين. إن الاستخدام غير المبرر لحق النقد أثبت أن ذلك لا يخدم الأمن والسلم الدوليين، ولا يتسق مع المقاصد العليا لميثاق الأمم المتحدة. وما نشهده من استمرار قتل الأبرياء المدنيين في قطاع غزة خير مثال على سوء استخدام حق النقد. إن المملكة العربية السعودية وانطلاقا من حرصها الدائم على تحقيق أهداف وغايات الأمم المتحدة في حفظ الأمن والسلم الدوليين تجدد دعوتها لإصلاح مجلس الأمن ليكون أكثر عدالة في تمثيل واقعنا اليوم وأكثر فاعلية في مواكبة تحولات وتطورات المجتمع الدولي وأكثر كفاءة في معالجة تحدياته المشتركة. والمملكة على أهبة الاستعداد للتعاون مع بقية الدول الأعضاء في سبيل تحقيق هذا الهدف النبيل. وفي الختام كل ثقة أن اجتماعنا هذا يقدم مساهمة في الجهود الهادفة هذا يقدم مساهمة.
请古巴外交部副部长德克西奥先生阁下发言。
Muchas gracias. Excelentísimo señor Wang Yi, Ministro de Relaciones Exteriores de la República Popular China y Presidente del Consejo de Seguridad. Apoyamos la declaración que hará más adelante la República Bolivariana de Venezuela en nombre del Grupo de Amigos en Defensa de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Valoramos altamente la iniciativa de convocar este debate abierto. Reconocemos el relevante papel de China en la defensa del multilateralismo, la diplomacia, el desarrollo global y la paz. Próximos a conmemorar el 80 aniversario de las Naciones Unidas, el mundo atraviesa una compleja coyuntura caracterizada por graves y crecientes amenazas a la paz y la seguridad internacionales y una progresiva erosión de los fundamentos sobre los que descansa esta organización. La reunión de hoy nos invita a reflexionar sobre su papel esencial en la preservación de la paz y la seguridad internacionales. Hemos sido testigos de la retirada de la mayor potencia mundial de organismos internacionales, con absoluto desprecio por la importante actividad que estos desempeñan. Somos testigos del apoyo y participación de esa gran potencia, sin reparos éticos ni morales, en la expansión del genocidio contra el pueblo palestino, de las declaraciones sobre planes de usurpación de tierras, limpieza étnica y anexión, de la elevación de la ideología racista y supremacista, de la vulneración de acuerdos ambientales para favorecer a las corporaciones transnacionales, sin tener en cuenta los riesgos para la sostenibilidad de la vida en nuestro planeta. Ante ese escenario desafiante, reafirmamos la importancia del papel de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas como principal baluarte para hacer frente a las amenazas mundiales e intentos de socavar la cooperación y el diálogo internacionales. El respeto pleno a los principios y propósitos de la Carta de la ONU y de las normas del derecho internacional, así como la defensa del multilateralismo, son imprescindibles en este escenario internacional cada vez más peligroso y complicado, en el que la seguridad y el bienestar de nuestras naciones enfrentan retos sin precedentes. Ratificamos el llamado a emprender con urgencia transformaciones profundas de la organización en beneficio de las generaciones presentes y futuras. De igual modo, nos oponemos a las tendencias hacia la privatización del organismo y que éste se convierta en instrumento representativo de los intereses de las grandes potencias y el gran capital transnacional. Es cada vez más evidente que el mundo requiere encaminarse hacia la construcción de un orden internacional nuevo, con la participación de todos. Un debate como este puede ayudar y Cuba tiene el compromiso de contribuir. Ha de ser un orden en el que todas las naciones tengan la oportunidad de aportar y estar realmente representadas en igualdad de condiciones. Debe ser un orden sostenible que promueva la paz, la seguridad de todos, la justicia social, la prosperidad equitativa, el respeto a la pluralidad cultural, étnica y religiosa, que promueva el acceso democrático a la ciencia y la tecnología y los derechos humanos para todos, no solo para élites privilegiadas, que se base en la solidaridad, la cooperación y el respeto al derecho de cada país a escoger su sistema político, económico y social sin injerencia extranjera. Debe revitalizarse y fortalecerse el papel de la Asamblea General, sin intromisiones del Consejo de Seguridad en su labor. Es perentorio reformar el propio Consejo de Seguridad y convertirlo en un órgano verdaderamente transparente, inclusivo, democrático y representativo, que pueda cumplir con efectividad su responsabilidad de mantener la paz y la seguridad internacionales y actuar sin dobles raseros para preservar la credibilidad de las Naciones Unidas. La presencia de Cuba en la arbitraria lista estadounidense de estados que supuestamente patrocinan el terrorismo y que ese gobierno publica como instrumento de coerción es un acto de agresión y no en balde provoca el repudio de la comunidad internacional. Es una manipulación grosera de la lucha contra el terrorismo, una forma de atacar a países que identifica como adversarios por el simple hecho de defender estos su plena soberanía y el derecho a la libre determinación. Es además una manifestación evidente de los problemas del orden internacional actual. Mientras persista la aplicación de medidas económicas coercitivas unilaterales como vía para alcanzar objetivos de política exterior, y en tanto no cesen los enfoques punitivos contra países en desarrollo, no puede hablarse de multilateralismo real e inclusivo para todos. Desde Cuba hemos apoyado las iniciativas globales propuestas por China, que son expresión de su voluntad de defender la paz en el mundo, el diálogo y la cooperación internacionales, la igualdad entre las naciones y los pueblos, y la complementariedad, así como el rechazo al hegemonismo y las medidas de coerción económica. La humanidad precisa de solidaridad, cooperación y diálogo, y menos egoísmo, imposición y coerción. Merece un compromiso firme y renovado con el multilateralismo para garantizar la convivencia pacífica, preservar la paz y la seguridad internacionales y encontrar soluciones duraderas a los problemas sistémicos. En ese empeño siempre se podrá contar con Cuba. Muchas gracias.
我感谢德克西奥先生阁下的发言。我现在请斯洛伐克外交和欧盟事务国际组织和人权事务司司长罗索查先生阁下发言。
Mr. President, thank you for convening this open debate on the important issue of multilateralism and improving global governance. I would also like to thank Secretary General Guterres for his statement to the Council. The theme of today's debate is of utmost relevance for all of us and all of our citizens. We all share a common interest in a workable international system, particularly in the context of international peace and security. And we all should continue to make every effort to the peaceful purposes of the United Nations. Mr. President, before I start, I would like to align myself with the statement to be delivered by the European Union. I would like to add a few additional comments from a national perspective. The first point I would like to emphasize is that we are at a time of profound global transformation. The world today is becoming more multipolar and fragmented. However, this does not mean the world has to become less multilateral. To the contrary, global governance and cooperation must be the foundation for the changing world that brings new challenges but also offers new possibilities for collaboration. In any event, the United Nations role as the guarantor of international legal order and rule of law must not just be preserved but actively strengthened in the future. The second point I would like to raise concerns the functioning of the Security Council in managing peace and security in today's world. The UN Charter specifies that the Council acts on behalf of all UN members. The Security Council must not be passive in the face of conflicts, crises, and atrocities. In a contemporary world, we need credible, timely, and decisive action by the Council in exercise of its responsibility. No people should feel abandoned by the international community in this regard. Lastly, Mr. President, I want to speak about the critical importance of implementing the Pact for the Future, adopted at the United Nations by member states last September. The Pact is the most comprehensive international agreement in years. Its adoption was an important success for multilateralism and the rules-based global order. The Pact is also a strong commitment on the part of the international community to reform the UN work on international peace and security. In order to make the most of this new impetus, we must now work together to turn ambitions of the Pact into concrete results and improvements. The Security Council too must play its part and act on the key action points proposed in the Pact that are of relevance to the Council and the international peace and security matters. I thank you very much for your attention.
我感谢罗索查先生阁下的发言。我现在请乌克兰外交部副部长别查女士阁下发言。
Mr. President, Ukraine commends the initiative of the President of China to hold this important debate and takes note of the briefest presentations. As it rightly pointed out in the concept paper for this debate, our world has entered a new period of turbulence and changes. This means, in particular, that the foundations of multilateralism that was supposed to be the bedrock of the global security and stability are under immense strain. The Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine is among the starkest manifestation of this crisis. The very institutions, first and foremost the UN, rooted in international law and designed to prevent such conflicts, unfortunately failed to stop the aggressor. It is true, as the concept note reminds, that thanks to the UN efforts, no new world war has happened. However, this offers little consolation to those Ukrainians whose towns have been completely destroyed, to the scale comparable to or even exceeding the devastation of the Second World War. This war is not only about Ukraine. This war is not only about Europe. The Russian Federation has turned food and energy into weapons, exacerbating global crisis. Its manipulation of energy supplies has destabilized markets far beyond Europe. Its nuclear threats undermine decades of non-proliferation efforts. This is a direct assault on global security and stability. Moreover, suffering, destruction, and casualties are not confined to Ukraine only. They are also endured in other conflicts across the globe, in particular in Africa and the Middle East. Beyond this, we confront the attempts to undermine the credibility and efficiency of key multilateral institutions from inside. Nowhere are these malicious attempts more evident than in this particular chamber, where a state that wages a war of aggression enjoys the privilege of permanent seat and veto power. The Security Council cannot serve its primary function if it is paralyzed by those who actively undermine this mission. The situation exposes a structural flaw within the Security Council and in the existing global governance system as a whole. To address it, our multilateral system must be strengthened with preventive and enforcement mechanism. We're convinced that concrete actions are required to ensure that a state in the permanent seat, which is involved in a conflict or a situation that the Council is considered, is limited in the exercise of its veto right, as it cannot do it impartially due to a conflict of interest. If irresponsible behavior, even from the permanent seat, comes at a cost, the integrity and efficiency of our platform will be secured. If the UN begins to resemble a boxing ring with fighters, their supporters and passive spectators, the prospects for the global security will be very bleak. Distinguished colleagues, achieving comprehensive, just and lasting peace for Ukraine will be a litmus test for multilateralism, and it will be also a litmus test for the UN. As most of you are aware, we have submitted a draft resolution of the General Assembly on the matter dedicated to the anniversary of the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine. It will be adopted on February 24th. In that draft, we in particular propose to acknowledge multilateral processes aimed at achieving just peace consistent with this charter, with the UN Charter, as well as efforts by various members in presenting their visions for settlement. It is a question now if we, as a global community, can uphold the fundamental principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity enshrined in the UN Charter, or will we allow aggression and impunity to set dangerous precedents for future conflicts? The answer will determine whether multilateralism remains a viable mechanism for global peace or whether it will erode into irrelevance. We believe that international support for Ukraine's fight for freedom and independence implies joint upholding the territorial integrity and sovereignty as imperative principles of international law, as well as returning to the respect for the UN Charter. I encourage you to support this draft, as it will be the right answer to the above questions. We are confident that support of Ukraine in a situation of illegal, unprovoked, and unjustified Russia's war of aggression means support of the territorial integrity as a UN principle. Ukraine, in its turn, stands ready to work with all responsible nations to ensure that the UN is not just a forum for statements, but a force for action. We urge this Council to rise to the challenge and take decisive steps forward, towards meaningful reform. The cost of inaction is too high. It's not just for Ukraine, but for the future of multilateralism and the international order itself. Thank you.
我感谢别查女士阁下的发言。我仅提醒各位发言人将发言时间限制在4分钟以内，以便安理会能够快速开展工作。下面我请科威特代表发言。
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. شكرا السيد الرئيس، ويشرفني أن ألقي هذا البيان بالنيابة عن المجموعة العربية. ومن خلالكم السيد الرئيس أرحب بداية بمعالي السيد وانغ وزير الخارجية جمهورية الصين الشعبية الصديقة، وأتقدم لكم بالشكر والثناء على عقدكم هذه الجلسة الهامة وما يمثله ذلك من تسليط الضوء على أحد أبرز الموضوعات المطروحة أمامنا اليوم بشكل متكرر: حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين من خلال ممارسة تعددية الأطراف، إصلاح وتحسين الحوكمة العالمية. حيث أن جلسة اليوم تتيح لنا الفرصة لمناقشة وتقييم مسؤولياتنا المشتركة تجاه التزامنا بالمبادئ والمقاصد الواردة في ميثاق الأمم المتحدة، والتي تشكل أحد أعمدة العمل الدولي متعدد الأطراف وأكثر الطرق فعالية لمواجهة التهديدات القائمة. سيد الرئيس، تأتي جلستنا اليوم في وقت دقيق وحساس للغاية، حيث يشهد عالمنا اليوم تحديات سياسية واقتصادية واجتماعية وبيئية متشابكة ومعقدة غير مسبوقة، مما وضع النظام الدولي متعدد الأطراف تحت اختبار مفصلي قد يكون الأكثر صعوبة وإلحاحا منذ العام 1945. ونظرا لذلك الواقع، يتعين على أعضاء مجلس الأمن العمل بشكل موحد وجماعي، بالإضافة إلى تعاون وتعاضد المجتمع الدولي، وذلك من خلال تجاوز الانقسامات الحادة والخلافات المتجذرة التي باتت تجابه اطلاع المجتمع الدولي بمسؤولياته الواردة في ميثاق الأمم المتحدة. وإتماما لتلك المقاصد، هناك مجموعة من المبادئ بنفس القدر من الأهمية يجب أن تشكل حجر زاوية للعلاقات الدولية. ورغم مرور قرابة 80 عاما منذ صياغة واعتماد مبادئ ومقاصد ميثاق الأمم المتحدة، تظل القضية الفلسطينية الاختبار الأبرز لشرعية ومصداقية ميثاق الأمم المتحدة، فهي قضية محورية ترتبط ارتباطا وثيقا بمبادئ ومقاصد الميثاق، لا سيما حق الشعوب في تقرير المصير وحظر استخدام القوة المسلحة في المصالح غير المشتركة. علاوة ذلك، تتسق القضية الفلسطينية مع كافة أنواع الشرعية الدولية، فهناك قرارات للجمعية العامة ومجلس الأمن ومجلس حقوق الإنسان، بالإضافة إلى ما صدر مؤخرا على المحكمة الجنائية الدولية بتاريخ 21 نوفمبر الماضي فيما يتعلق بجرائم الحرب والجرائم ضد الإنسانية، علاوة على الرأي الاستشاري التاريخي الصادر عن محكمة العدل الدولية بتاريخ 19 يوليو الماضي، والذي انتصر للحق ولمبادئ ميثاق الأمم المتحدة التي ارتضيناها جميعا عند انضمامنا لهذه المنظمة. ومع ذلك فإن استمرار الاحتلال في انتهاك القوانين والأعراف الدولية لعقود دون مساءلة يبعث رسالة خطيرة ستتوارثها الأجيال القادمة حول فعالية وقدرة النظام الدولي. وننوه هنا أن الأمم المتحدة قد خلقت بغية حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين وضمان عدم ومن هذا المنطلق لا يمكننا التغاضي عن التحدي الممنهج للميثاق، فضلا عن الممارسات الأحادية التي تتنافى مع كافة الأعراف والقوانين الدولية، لا سيما في ظل إمعان القوة القائمة بالاحتلال في الاعتداءات الوحشية والبربرية وحلمها البائس في الدعوة للتهجير القسري للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق، الأمر الذي يهدد الاستقرار الإقليمي ويعوق جهود تحقيق السلام الدائم. ونؤكد على ضرورة تحمل مجلس الأمن مسؤولياته لضمان تثبيت اتفاق وقف إطلاق النار وفق القرار 2735، بالإضافة إلى خفض التصعيد في الضفة الغربية وبقية الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة، وضمان حماية المدنيين وإدخال المساعدات الإنسانية بشكل مستدام إلى قطاع غزة، واستئناف العملية السلمية بما يضمن حق الشعب الفلسطيني في تقرير المصير وإقامة دولته المستقلة على ترابه الوطني. ولا يجب أن ننسى أن ما شاهدناه نهاية العام الماضي في الكنيست الإسرائيلي بشأن التشريعات التي تم اعتمادها لحظر عمل وكالة